Yeah, let's get hyped up. Matt is fired up today.
Yeah,
you guys.
I just got my I was out. It's Tuesday, so I was out doing the rowboat section of the camp week, and I was just
pumping.
Whoom. It was great.
You've been watching all those Andrew Tate videos. Your testosterone is flowing. I'm just kidding.
I was the alpha of rowboating.
You're
at camp, canoeing, whatever.
Camp canoeing. So,
but no, it was a late night. It was Anthony kept us up with his drinks and
Galliano
and Natty Light.
Yeah.
Galliano. And Natty Light with a Galliano floater. It's all the rage now. Y'all don't know.
Yeah.
We need to invent some hipster drink involving Galliano because that shit's been on shelves for decades.
I actually did already. If you mix a little less than an ounce and a half shot with a full glass of Coca-Cola, it will taste exactly like a root beer. It's really weird. And if you drink it any other way, it's disgusting.
I'm on my way, fam. Say no more.
Sounds like a drink I created like 2 years ago. I would take like Crown Apple and put it in a glass of ice, and then I would take a spoon and put it over and dabble Cab Sab over it. So it would just like layer on the top, and it was so good. And you would have two, and you would be cooked.
Did you like
Cab
make
Sab? Who are you?
Yeah.
I don't even know you are anywhere right now.
Did you make like a picture on it? You looked like you were making barista cream pictures.
Well, no, it's like you put the spoon over it upside down, and then you pour the Cab Sab over the spoon, so it kind of displaces over the top of the Crown Apple instead of like fully mixing in.
Yeah, I would have never ever thought to do that. Did you like? Did you like play with your mustache while you made the drink?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Twiddled it and
wearing an apron.
I fancied myself a night. But
with a pocket watch that you made yourself from
spare parts. In a way, you could say I was leveraging that cab over the.
Wow! All right, now let's.
Speaking of,
I'll just leave now.
As opposed to just repurposing wine and mixing
your
it.
wine.
Yeah, exactly. You got to have a little leverage to it.
Wine is not meant to be.
So here's the conversation, y'all. Right. I'm sick of people using the word repurpose because it sounds like you're recycling, and that's not what you're doing with your content. You're leveraging your content. So we are on a mission to replace the word repurpose with leverage because it's an important distinction to make when you are creating content as a marketing tool. And so, like, for example, we produce podcasts at Heartcast Media. And so a lot of people think, oh, it's a podcast, right? And then I have tools to market the podcast. But what a podcast actually is SEO content, and it's leverage. And so you can take one interview and leverage, not repurpose, leverage that into multiple pieces of content. You have content for social media, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, static images. Then you have videos for LinkedIn that you can do vertical. And now you have YouTube Shorts, and you have Instagram Reels, and you have all this content. Then you've got a blog post, which is loaded with SEO and the video embedded on that. You've got your CTAs, everything else. Like, what you're doing is creating a ton of content, and you're leveraging that content. You're taking 30 minutes of your time, and you're leveraging that time into an arsenal of content for all of the platforms. And I think that's what people really miss is like all content is SEO, right? But you're not repurposing it. You're not pulling something out of the trash and forcing it into another dish to turn it into something else. You're very intentionally creating content to leverage on multiple platforms. And so I was talking about that, and Matt got really fired up. So I'm really excited to hear what Matt has to say about this because...
Well, it's just how often do you see a marketing team or a social team or just like pick a random podcast, create some awesome content, and then for it to be used once and never touched again? And like you were saying, you got your social media posts that are all focused on generating engagement, your blog posts about whatever, and it's just reaching out to every topic in the industry to pull SEO. And like you said, we're not repurposing stuff. It's not like I'm taking this piece of content so I can use this part for TikTok and this part for this, and I'm only going to use this for this. It's like, no, like how are we going to, as we say, leverage this outstanding episode we just did that is getting great views and has great content, and how can we leverage it across multiple platforms to keep growing engagement across literally everything? And that way this is, say if it goes out on TikTok, it's going to tie back to this. How do we bring it all back to one place and completely grow the entire piece of content that we just created.
Yeah, like making the content with intentions, like, because when you repurpose content, what are you taking? You're taking content that was at one time for a specific purpose, that was created for one specific purpose, one specific platform, or to talk to a certain kind of person. And if you're repurposing that, you're really using it on a platform or in a way that it wasn't necessarily intended, and probably isn't going to be most effective. And especially now, the world changes so fast, not just in the post 2020 world, but in just social media in general. Marketing, things are changing every year. What was an awesome idea in marketing last year sucks this year. So you got to kind of stay on the cutting edge, and you got to make that intentional content that speaks to people today, talks about the things that are going on today. You can tell when somebody has repurposed a video from a conference from 3 years ago just by the language. Little things are off. They're mentioning things that aren't happening anymore, and they're just hoping that you forget about it and give them the benefit of the doubt, and hey, most of the content is still relevant. Well, no, that's the videos people shut off these days. That's why people only watch super short form content. Every single word is important. Every single thing you say needs to be super intentional. And if you design the things you make for the specific platforms they're supposed to go on with the specific goals in mind, you're going to be successful. If you get lazy about it, you're just going to end up with the same content repurposed a bunch of different times where it's not super effective.
Well, and to your point there, you said, say you're a podcast that is just, you're the same 2 or 3 people on it every time. Like let's just say us for this one, right? You like you said, you want to get the important things you say out. But take a podcast, for example, that every show is a different interview and they have a new guest on. How are you going to leverage that guest and take the best things they said throughout that 45-minute interview and take that 30-second clip that's just like, holy shit, like that 30 seconds might draw people into this entire 45-minute podcast.
And
how are we going to leverage that across everything instead of just
term,
exactly.
And more importantly, what was that 30 seconds, and why did you interview that person, and how does that pertain to your business and your goals for your revenue, your whatever? And that's where like the intention comes back in, right? And if you're leveraging that piece of content knowingly to go to these platforms, and you know that you're trying to like generate revenue, create strategic relationships, then you're going to be a lot more intentional about who you interview. And you're not just going to interview some entrepreneur in another industry and ask bullshit questions and have a lame ass interview that you never really market and you don't even tell them about. Because what you're doing is then you think, oh, I'll repurpose that. And no, that has nothing to do with moving the needle for you and your business or what your audience wants and everything else. So that's where like this idea of leveraging something, it's to me, the difference between leveraging and repurposing is leverage feels like something that you plan ahead in advance, right? How can I maximize the smallest amount of my time, right, to get the biggest impact? Yeah. And repurpose feels like an afterthought. Like, oh, let's like, you know what I mean? Let's go take that. There's
we already did it. We might as well use something for it. It's like people think in those ways a lot. I already cooked it, so I guess I'll eat the rest of it, even though it's like burned and shit.
Right. I got a lasagna in my fridge that would argue with that, but I ate like one piece and I was like, not so much. But yeah, I mean, it's you got to get really intentional with your content so you know what you're doing and that you're making sense for your business and you're doing things intentionally, prepared in advance, because we get all these calls, right, with clients, who see us on the internet or see our website and they're so impressed with what an amazing website it is. And they say, yeah, we have all this old content. We want you to go through it. Or, we're doing this podcast and we want you to go through and pick the gems. And it's like, okay, sure. We can do that with current content. But really, like, you should be planning your content out so you're hitting a bunch of gems all the time based on what people are searching for. And there isn't any value in us going through old content because, again, it's an afterthought. You're recycling. You're repurposing content that was meant for a different audience with a different intention, everything else. So, no, yes, you want to chop it up and you want to get it out there just to show that you're visible. But you don't want to pay somebody what it takes to sort through an hour of your stuff to find 3 gems. That is not your best use of time or money. And I think it's that whole repurposing concept is really messing people up there.
Mm-hmm. Nobody knows the gem in your episode from your interview better than you,
right?
From asking the questions and hearing the answers and thinking it through. I think I'll give a quick. There's one podcast that I think does an incredible job of this. So it's called the Pit Stop Podcast. So like over the last 4 or 5 years in the United States, Formula One has just absolutely grown tremendously because of that Netflix series Drive to Survive that came out like 5 years ago on Netflix. So Formula One went from like just being a European supercar racing series to now like the most popular racing series in the United States. And this season of Formula One, there's this podcast that came out. It's called Pit Stop. It's these two kids from England, two guys like 24, 25, and they just watched the most recent Netflix season, the year before this season started, and they were hooked. They got all into it. So they started this podcast from nothing. And from starting it this season in January to December now, they've had drivers on, journalists, all kinds of crazy stuff. And their angle is we don't know anything about this sport. We literally watch the Netflix TV show. So we're here to learn and like open up the space for everybody to learn about this new sport. Whereas like in a lot of sports and everything, like media, especially Formula One, it's like all snobby. Like if you don't know the sport, you shouldn't be a fan. And these are two guys that are playing the angle of we're here to learn. We know nothing and we want to learn as much as we can. We want to invite new people into this sport. And they've interviewed like so many like crazy, like high-end people, like two Ferrari drivers and all this stuff. But they play it like, even in their interviews, like we have no idea what this is. We have no idea what this is. So you look at their content and how they leverage it throughout everything they do, the shorts, TikTok, everything. They will grab these quotes from interviews. One way they do is they grab a quote from the guy they interviewed or whoever. And it's like, I watch it and I'm like, how did this get brought up? Or like, what was the question that led to this? And then they like play jokes on themselves and put the stupid questions they ask. And you're just like, they're like one podcast that I've seen this year that's just like, I've become fully invested in. Like the way they do things is incredible. And like I said, for two just like random 24, 25-year-old kids from England that just started it off a whim to grow to what they are now is insane.
Yeah, and it's like you said, you know the gems. Like I know, like if I do an interview, like the one I did with Michael Aiken, I was like, oh man, like when I was editing the files at that point, I went in, I knew exactly the parts that I wanted to clip.
Well, no one can speak your back then, we were language better than you, you know?
Yeah, because it's like, yeah, and more importantly, if I know that I want to, okay, for example, this podcast right here, we know what our main point of this episode is. It's talking about the difference between leveraging and repurposing. So of course, one of our snippets is going to be about when we really define the difference, how like, okay, one is you think about it in advance, the other one after. We're not going to clip a short of Matt talking about the podcast that he just listened to, even though it's interesting, but that's not what we're going to clip and put on there. Right. And so a lot of clients, it's this idea that you're not really being intentional with your content, because if you knew the goal of me interviewing this person on my podcast is, number one, I want to do business with this guy. I want to take him out to lunch next week and I want him to refer me to clients. So I am going to, interview him and ask him all these questions. Second, I want my audience to know that I'm very knowledgeable about this product, idea, service, whatever. So that's what I'm going to do. And then number three, I want people to hire me. So the 3 clips I'm going to do are me like making that person laugh and making them look really smart so they share it. The number 2 clip is going to be me speaking intelligently about said service. And the 3rd clip is going to be me and that person and low-key the soft pitch to know that, and by the way, you can also hire me. So clients should know going into a podcast interview or any content that you're making, you should know what the goal of that content is, and you should be making sure that you're including those 3 things in there. And I think a lot of people have this repurpose idea. I'll think about it afterwards, fix it in post. And that is not real, right? So
no, I think a lot of the repurpose idea comes from always what we hear from clients, right? They need to save time. So they think that the best way to save time is going to be to just use all that old stuff that maybe I didn't get the most out of. But like you're saying, it's not going to be effective. It's better to be intentional when you create it now, because it doesn't take as long as you think. And here's a shameless plug from Heartcast Media. Most of our clients come into a studio for 45 minutes, Matt, right? At maybe 60 minutes a month. And we're able to create enough short form videos for them for the entire, for a day. They say that they don't spend a month in the studio, 45 minutes to an hour a day. And for one day, and then we have enough once a month, and we have enough content for them for the entire month. My point is, it doesn't take as long as you think to create this content. If you're doing what Molly says, which is intentionally creating it, understanding why it's going to be here, what's going to be effective when it's on TikTok, why it's going to be here, and get broken down into a long form, maybe podcast interview, and then the shorts and what they're going to do. And if you're just doing it all at once in 45 minutes, you wrap up your content creation for the entire month, and you don't need to go back and repurpose stuff that's not effective. You create the new stuff intentionally now, and it doesn't take as long as you think it's going to take.
And if you're short on time, spending an hour and a half to like really comb through a 30-minute interview to find something that's relevant, well, you should probably hire a productivity coach, because that is not your best use of time.
Well, it just makes me think of like when we work with Kavita and Alex and how they're not really podcasts, but the intention of that content is for long-term leverage,
Big long-term
And
leverage.
like Anthony said, it takes an hour. We sit in the virtual studio for an hour and a half, and we've got long-term content that we're going to leverage for months for you.
Exactly. So 2023 is the year that we kill repurpose and really focus on leveraging content and how to get that done. So that's kind of the basis of camp content. So I think this is a good episode for us to jump off with. So on that note, we'll catch you guys on the next one.
Produced by Heartcast Media.